Hi, I'm Bryn from Jaxtina English. Welcome to our video on English vocabulary. In this video, we will be talking about your job. Or let's say, what do you do? Like a teacher, or a doctor, or a taxi driver. Okay, so I'll be going through some ways that you can describe your job and also some vocabulary related to jobs. Now, the two most common ways to ask are going to be, where do you work? And what do you do? These could be answered by simply stating your job title using the phrase, I'm a. So for example, I'm a teacher. But if you're not a teacher, let's learn some other words about jobs. Actor and actress. Actor for boy, actress for girl. If you've ever seen Titanic, you know Leonardo DiCaprio is the best actor in the world. Number 2, doctor. Are you feeling sick? You might need a doctor. Number 3, engineer. You feel like designing and building something? You're definitely an engineer. Number 4, accountant. Are you good with numbers? You could be an accountant. Number 5, taxi driver. If you've ever been on the back of a Grab, you've met a taxi driver. Number 6, chef. Now remember guys, this one is not pronounced chef, it is chef. Okay? The person who prepares the food in the kitchen at the restaurant. Number 7, manager. If you work in a company and you are responsible for other staff members, you might be the manager. Number 8, waiter and waitress. Waiter for boy, waitress for girl. The person who takes the food from the chef and gives it to the customer. Number 9, computer programmer. If you design software, you might be a computer programmer. And finally, number 10, pilot. If you enjoy women who are older than you, you might be a pilot. VCOM. So let's look at some other ways to talk about your job, because there are, of course, different employment statuses. If you work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, that's a full-time job, and you're very busy. If you work less than that, maybe just 10 hours, 15 hours, that's a part-time job. You could say, I'm unemployed, or I'm out of work. If you're looking for a job, you can say that as well. But also say, I'm not working at the moment. If you're sending out some CVs to various companies, you could say, I'm looking for a job. Now, if you simply say, I'm a teacher, or I'm a doctor, or I've got a full-time job, and not add any details to that, it sounds kind of like you don't want to continue the conversation. For now, we'll focus on expanding the answer to that question, what do you do, or where do you work? Now, these might seem like simple questions to answer, but they are, in fact, many ways you can answer them. For example, you can say, I work at, in, for, and with. Let's take a look at these prepositions in a bit more detail. When to say, I work at, and I work for. When you want to tell someone you work at a specific company, such as Jaxtina or FPT, that's when you're going to use at or for. For example, where do you work? I work at Jaxtina English. Or I work for FPT. You can also use for when describing exactly who you work for. You may be asked, who do you work for? How to answer that question, who do you work for? You can say, I work for a publisher. I work for an investment bank. I work for the government. I work for Jaxtina English. Okay, so what about if you work for yourself? You can say, I'm self-employed, or even I have my own business. Next, we're going to talk about the preposition in, which can be used in a variety of ways. Firstly, it can be used when talking about the place you work. For example, I work in a center. Secondly, it can be used in talking about which city or country you work in. For example, I work in Vietnam and I work in Hanoi. Third, it can be used for talking about a particular place or department inside of your company. For example, I work in the marketing department, I work in human resources, I worked in hospitality, I work in IT, I work in television, I work in publishing, I work in PR, and I work in sales. Lastly, we'll talk about when to use the preposition with. When you say I work with, you can use this one when describing the objects and people in your work life. For example, I work with Vietnamese students, or I work with computers. If you want to add some details about your job, when you answer this question, you can do so using these three examples. I'm responsible for, I'm in charge of, and my job involves. After using one of these, you can describe what it is you actually do in detail. Let me give you an example with everything I've covered. I'm a teacher. I work for an English center called Jaxtina English. My job involves working with Vietnamese students who are learning English as a second language. Here's another example. I'm a doctor. I work in a hospital. I'm responsible for the well-being of my patients. My job involves diagnosing patients' illnesses, prescribing medicine, and curing people. Okay, let's do one more example. I'm a HR manager. I work at eLingo. I'm in charge of recruiting and coordinating people at the company. Okay, next let's go through some common vocabulary associated with jobs and interviews. To resign, to quit, or to leave your job. Okay, what this means is to give up your job or position by telling your boss you don't want to work for them anymore. An example, my friend hates his job, he wants to quit. So let's say you've quit your job. Well, you need to give your boss some time before you leave. And there's a word for that, it's called notice. Okay, the amount of time you give your boss before leaving. An example, before quitting his job, my friend gave the HR department 2 weeks notice. Okay, so what happens when you are too old or you have a lot of money and you don't need or cannot work anymore? You retire. For example, I just won $2 million. I think it's time for me to retire. Okay, next is some vocabulary around what happens when you are forced to stop working by your boss, usually for something you did. To be dismissed, to be fired, to get fired, to be sacked, to get the sack, and to lose your job. Okay, let's have an example. My friend got caught drinking on the job and he was fired. Well, that's all for today's lesson on how to describe your job. I hope that it was useful for you. I will be posting more videos in the future on how to apply for a job and how to go through an interview in English. Don't forget to like this video, share the video with your friends, and subscribe to our Jaxtina English channel. Bye!